Okay. This is our third and final session for this particular quarter, and we are talking about how discipline and how justice through appropriate means of discipline is a lever into social justice, and how that has like a really meaningful impact on students, depending on how that's done. So let's first, before we dig into tonight's topic, I would love to hear how it went with whatever aspect of rigor you focused on in your classroom. So whatever your lesson plan was about or your video, how did it go? What did you notice? Can you share a little bit so that everybody knows what you focused on, and then say how it went? Does anybody want to start?
I focused on choice. It's still hard for me because I really like it to be organized, and I don't like people doing their own thing, and I don't like people like running around the room and all over the place. And so it's still something I'm working on, but I try to give them more choice, but it's still hard because like they all 25 of them want to yell out at the same time what they want. And it's hard.
Are there some examples, Hannah, that have worked that you have like felt comfortable with relinquishing some of that control with?
One thing that works is during phonics time, I guess more individually. Yeah, during phonics time, when I see the sounds, I let them either write a word with that sound or just write the letter. And that works. But if it's something more like choosing what we do for recess or choosing what we do for Go Noodle, like we vote, but there are always people that are like, oh, I wanted something else. And then it's just chaos because there's 25 kids and one teacher.
Do you give them the two choices, or do you say like, what would you like to do, and like leave it open-ended?
Sometimes I leave it open-ended, but that's too much. So then I choose two and they can vote on it, but still, I mean, someone's always going to be upset. So
yeah, definitely.
That's not really what I'm worried about. It's more like they're upset and they will pout and just talk really loud.
Yeah, I think part of it too, and it might be their age, honestly. And then, you know, like you don't really understand like fairness necessarily. It just like always feels unfair, you know? But I wonder too, if you say like, okay, we're going to have this choice, and then the next time you do the other option. And sometimes you maybe don't have to, and like, you know, the option that had like only a third of the class vote for or something like that. Just to like show them like, I hear you have a voice, I understand what you're saying, now we're going to try it like this, because you might have voted for the other one, but actually this might be your favorite, you just don't know it yet. Just a possibility. Cool. Thanks for sharing first, Hannah. Meg, do you want to go next?
Okay, so I've always done like, or been mindful to have my kids be making their own choices. And I think I mentioned that last time too. Something that I actually just found out was another core member who teaches first grade said that she has like a choice center where they get to choose like what puzzle, if they want to do like a puzzle, like stamps, like blocks, Legos, things like that. And that's something that I really, now thinking about it, and I'm just like getting into centers as well, but and using that kind of like as a, almost like a reward. Like if your clip is still on number 5, like in green, then you can go to the choice center. So that's something new that I want to implement. Then I've also been looking at asking more like rigorous questions, especially in small group instruction. What I found with that was that I just need to really make sure I plan, not just for centers, but like what is my teacher-led center going to look like, and what text are they also going to be reading. However, I felt more confident in asking them just almost like getting down to a routine of, okay, so why? Where is this textual evidence coming from? And what can you do if you don't know, like, what your answer is going to be? Like, can you do process of elimination or whatnot? And so a lot of them are getting that and already starting, like, to question themselves, okay, so what can I do when this comes up? Or if I don't know the answer, should I go back to the text?
That sounds awesome. I think I don't want to like respond each time, but I feel like for both of these too, so much of it is like we're implementing something new or we're trying something different. I'm going to teach you how this like looks and feels. So like I'm going to teach you what it's like to have choice, you know, in your small groups, or what it's like to have ownership over your choice. I'm going to teach you what it's like to, you know, like tackle really complex or like open-ended questions and things like that. Because you're not just expected to like, you know, miraculously be able to do it right on the first time and things like that. So I think that's awesome. And I think this is the perfect time of year to be trying some of those things, because especially in the next couple of weeks, as we like get into that, well, we're going to come up on 9 weeks test very soon, but we're building routines that can go into fourth quarter pretty effortlessly without having to then like retrain or teach them how to do something new when we like really get into that crunch time, especially the beginning of fourth quarter. I'm a little bit worried about the other people. I know there's only 2 other people, but I want us to pause really fast. And I'm going to send a quick email.
It's Capricia and Kenya, right?
Yeah.
I know I at least have Kenya's number. I can text her.
That would be amazing. Just say like, hey, in case the link didn't work, the new one is posted. And actually, I'll just text Capricia because I have her email on my phone for sure. Okay, we'll pause for like 2 minutes. Thanks for doing that, Meg.
No problem.
Okay. I just feel really bad if people are like, I don't know what to do. It's like not working or whatever. Or they're like in some random like Zoom room by themselves and we don't know how to get there, because that definitely has happened before too. Okay, so really briefly, I want to talk about why or how is rigor a social justice component for us and for our students, especially after our last session and after the things that you've been focusing on or trying. Would love to hear your thoughts just on in terms of that question.
Can you say the question one more time? Is it the why is rigor a social justice component? It's that question?
Yep.
Okay. Let me think. Hold on. Okay, so I've been talking to my kids about this. And it's like reality of the state test that they're expected to take. Like, it's really hard. And it's not just based off of, I just think of like math skills, you know, it's not just based off of the skill. It's a lot more problem solving and whatnot. And we really aren't doing our kids justice. And we're also taking part in setting them up to fail if we aren't being as rigorous as the test is. And I think that's just a big social justice component, because like we aren't necessarily given all the materials and like everything we can in order to help them and push them further, but we are given like these small things and helping them like question and think and strategize, and be able to make decisions for themselves and become human, like good, intentional human beings, and those are the things that we can do in order to help them. And I think that's what's giving them, like, that's the social justice part of it, because if we just kind of teach them the skill, we're not even teaching them and setting them up for success, and it's not fair. But that's what we gotta do. And it's good because it's not like rigor is a bad thing at all. And they should continuously have rigor and be supported and try to be hardworking all the time and to be encouraged.
Hannah, any other thoughts or ideas around that?
To me, it's rigor is a social justice component because our students sometimes being from Mississippi or being people of color, sometimes they're not seen as knowing a lot or being educated. So I think that having rigorous education helps show people that everybody deserves a good education.
I think it's also connected to the reading that we did from last time. Like, if we're not giving them a rigorous education, what are we setting them up to be able to do, like, not only like in school and other grades, because obviously they have a lot more grades after us, but what are we setting them up to be able to do in their future? Like, their schooling is minuscule compared to the number of years that they'll spend working, and like doing a job that they either find meaning in and find enjoyment in, or doing a job that they feel like, is the best that they could get or something like that. We never want students to like be set up to be in a position like that. Awesome. Okay. Hi, Kenya. We just did like a quick rehash of what happened from the rigor session last time. So we're going to dive into this component of what does discipline look like in our schools and in our classrooms, and thinking about this like big question, which has been a big question for all of our sessions, but what's at stake for our students. So the first thing I want us to look at is this impact of adverse childhood events. I'm going to share a link because and it's really short, so I think we can all just look at it while we're chatting. Sorry, I can't do two things at once. So it's in the chat box right now. Basically, what's important here is that these events that students or children or people are exposed to have serious impact on their mental and physical health. And there's also this component of investing in their resilience to be successful in the long term. So hopefully that opens. Go ahead and look at that. Like I said, it's really short. We're only going to look at the first 2 pages. So if you want to read the overview, the key findings, and then look at the measurement of adverse childhood experiences, these 8 things. And then whenever you're ready to talk about them, just put done in the chat. Do people need more time with this? Okay, so thinking about this particular PDF, I guess, article, also thinking about discipline in your school and in your classroom. Would love to hear your thoughts or reactions. I can ask an easier question if that helps. Is discipline in your classroom what you thought it was going to be, or different than what you came in expecting?
I can speak to that. Discipline in my classroom is significantly hard, and I was told so I figured out within the first week that it was a me problem and not a they problem, because it was happening with a lot of kids. And so I was told, I have to have consequences, I have to have a clip chart, blah, 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 blah. But then the reality of it also was that a lot of my kids have been ingrained in like a lot of their experiences in school. They most of the time or most easily respect and like behave if they are afraid of the teacher. And so it's not that they respect you, it's not that like, but they have their best behavior when they're afraid of you. And I figured out obviously right away that I'm not a scary person, and they tell me all the time, Miss Fuller, you have to be meaner, you have to be scarier. But like, and I keep telling them, like that's never gonna happen. I'm never gonna one day have that wake up. And so it's been a constant struggle to be able to kind of get them out of that habit, and see that like they could really have a great time based off of like positive be like positive rewards and whatnot rather than like negative rewards, because I think it's so much easier to give out rewards for being positive and like good behavior rather than it is to like take things away, because there's only so much you can take away, and even still they're very like immune to that. And especially the people who what's the word I want to use, but it has to do with this article too, like the more things you go through in life, what's the word? More not even prone, but like I want to say like you get tougher. It doesn't like affect you, and I felt that like differently in my own upbringing, but it's been hard because my kids are becoming prone to that, and I don't know how to be the scariness that they need and how to kind of take them away from that for at least this time being.
I would love to hear from everybody, especially related to this, and it could be any direction that you choose, just your thoughts or reactions.
I know in the classroom we have the clip chart with the different colors on it, but I'm finding like each day is not as effective to some students as it like I would think it would be, because I think it has a lot to do with the parent involvement too, like checking the folder to see what color they're on that day. And a lot of the kids, their parents don't check their behavior log nor sign off on it, so I know they don't read it. So I'm also finding too, like for example, a student today, he told me a fib that he did his homework, but he didn't. And I always tell the kids, like, I'd like for you to tell me the truth rather than fib to me. And so he's seen that I was upset, but it had more effect me saying, I'm very disappointed that you did that. you know, because I know that you're a good student, and you know that Miss Samuel doesn't like when you do this or that, so I'm very disappointed. And he's one of the students whose parents aren't really involved, so I think that has more of an effect on the clip chart. I don't like the clip chart, but we have to have that. And I know at that age too, I don't like what does that mean? I don't like disciplining a 4-year-old. You know, I just feel like it has more impact. Me sitting down talking to them eye level, on their level, I feel like they'll listen to it and be able to make adjustments with me just talking to them that way.
For me, I was surprised that violence wasn't further up because, well, like, you know, it had like economic hardship and then divorce, alcohol, violence for Mississippi. Because the kids I teach, they're always telling me like, oh yeah, my dad's in jail because he beat up my mom, and my other kids are like, yeah, my parents fight too, and so I'm kind of surprised that it was down further. But divorce is also a huge issue at my school with my students, and like I gotta deal with both parents, and some parents don't want me to deal with the other parent, and so that can be rough, especially for the kids. Like sometimes they don't know where they're supposed to go home. You know, like, where are you going home today? I think my mom's, but so it's hard.
So super helpful to hear your reactions, especially because everybody teaches in vastly different contexts. I think I really wish that I had read this article as a teacher, because I don't know the extent to your experience in terms of what behavior, what discipline looks like in your school or your classroom, but I think I was honestly shocked when I had a kindergartner that threw a chair across the room, you know, and like some of those things happen repeatedly, and it was just like the idea of changing or altering that behavior was never something that we were able to accomplish. You know, like we could minimize it to some extent for a short period of time, then it was like evolving in different ways. And it like baffled me, because I considered these things to not be prevalent with like a 5 or 6-year-old. So I think I was like very shocked by that, and also like totally not knowing how to handle it. So one thing that I think is so crucial in this particular article is considering these 8 components. And I know like table 2 shows, you know, like the most common for Mississippi. But if we think about what it means for students behavior-wise, and how behavior obviously has like direct correlation to academics, these 8 components are directly correlated to how they act, how they react. So let's just like think about our 2 or 3 most challenging students. I'd love to hear from everybody just really briefly. What's the most challenging about those students? Is it similar behaviors to what I mentioned? Is it something else? What is that?
For me, it's acting out for attention, and like it's really frustrating because I've tried like giving extra attention and they still act out, and then I'll try ignoring and they act out even more, and it's like either way I'm gonna get acting out, and it's really frustrating. And then it's like when I try to communicate with the parent, you know, they always think it's like other children, and a lot of times I had to remove that student and put him in his own little bubble, and he still acts out. And so it's just very frustrating. I don't know I really don't know what to do, but I understand why he acts the way he does. So I guess that's better than nothing. I understand where it's coming from. I know he had his father was killed when he was a baby, and the family is dealing with that still. And then mom is in school, so he's not getting that attention that he needs and wants, but it's still like I don't know how to channel it, so it's very frustrating, but very frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Hannah or Meg, just like oh sorry, go ahead.
For me, the two most challenging students is most challenging student. Well, I don't know. He's gotten better, but I have a student who is really smart. He reads on a fifth grade reading level, but his behavior is not good. And he just plays around and he talks and he jumps in the hall and he runs around and he takes stuff from people. And his behavior is just not good. And so I have to work with his grandma constantly, and it's so frustrating to me because I tell him, you are a leader. The kids follow you and they watch you, and when you're not being good, then they follow you and then they get in trouble too. But he has done a lot better since after winter break. And then my other student, yeah, she has very low self-esteem, and so I try to work with her on that. But she'll just break down, just stop working, just lay her head down, just start crying. And so today I actually tried something from that article. I gave her a little bear and I was like, this bear is sad, go out in the hall and hug it for a few minutes. And I went out there, I was like, does the bear feel better? She was like, yeah. And she came back in and did her work. So
cool.
I have two behavior kiddos, and one of them is just developmentally and just has like a lot of different special needs. And so he comes from that sort of sense. But then I also know he just got out of foster care too. And just seeing like the things that he looks up, like he doesn't know how to get onto much on the computer, but he knows how to get onto this one music video where they're shooting up like other people. And there are guns, and he knows how to get onto games where they're punching each other. So even though he doesn't necessarily verbally express it, you can just see what he is exposed to at home. And it's hard to also get parent involvement because he has like 8 other siblings too. So it's hard to be able to get him that attention that he needs, especially because he's so low and has so many different needs, and he needs those special services. But he's on a completely different curriculum than we are. So it's hard to be able to give him all of that. And then my other student, you can just tell that like when something went on at home and when something didn't, because she'll either come in and have a good day or a bad day. And she's very prone to people yelling, and just also doesn't take any ownership over her own actions. I definitely learned about that in school once, and I forget what it's called, but she never like accepts that she was doing something wrong. She always just projects it and that it's someone else's fault.
Okay, all of this is really helpful. Was anybody a psychology major by chance, or is anyone familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Oh, psych major. Mm-hmm.
So all of this directly correlated. The physiological component and the safety component are the very basic needs that have to be met for every person in order to like be able to do any of the others, right? In order to be successful or have confidence or, like have self-esteem, like all of those kinds of things. So if you think about it for students or like different, not every student's in the same situation, but, Hannah had mentioned students not knowing maybe whose house they were going to each day. So just like the uncertainty of like, where is my shelter coming from, or like something like that. I don't know if this came up at any point during some of the snow days, but there were like several different organizations that were helping students and families get meals for some of those days, especially if their meals were coming from both breakfast and lunch coming from the school, and families maybe not necessarily being able to support their whole family being home during the day on like a not a regular day, I guess. So just all kinds of things like that. Your shelter, food, warmth, like those kinds of things, all connected to, like how you perceive the world, how you perceive yourself, your family, your community, and stuff like that. The other thing I think to keep in mind is when we looked at this particular article is like the economic hardship component that is prevalent in Mississippi. And so for our students who are considered low income, are considered in that like economic hardship bracket, that's a form of trauma. And that form of trauma then manifests itself in a number of different ways, which could be, like Kenya had said, like outbursts, outbursts for attention, outbursts for inattention, like it can manifest it in, like a student maybe being nonverbal. Any number of things could be a result of the economic hardship component, our students being in low-income communities, and then those like basic needs being met or potentially not being met sometimes. So I wanted to like connect all of that and tie all of that back together, because I think all of those things are so important to thinking about how discipline happens both in our school and individually within our classroom. So let's connect that to the article that you read for pre-work. Thoughts or reactions? I have a couple of questions on the slide. You can answer these, but if there's anything else you want to share, by all means, feel free. The questions that I had prepared were just what stuck out to you. Where do you see yourself in this article or in using any of the things that were shared in the article? Where do you want to be in terms of how the article describes like having a space for helping students with getting over some of these like hardships, I guess. So anybody want to share?
I would love to do more stuff like the article, especially this peace room or peace corner. But, well, at my school, we don't have the resources to have like a room, a sensory room or anything. And I also had a question, could any kid go there or only if they have like an IEP or behavior plan?
I'm not sure, but when I reread it for tonight, I actually wondered the same thing. If I kind of wondered, like, what is the size of the school? If, like my school was super small, so any student could go and they were probably known. But if it's a larger school, I don't feel like that's probably the case. So I'm not sure, but I think that's a good question.
Yeah, my school doesn't have the resources to do anything like that, but I would like to do more in my classroom. The only issue is, and I need help with this, is, if I have something like that and I tell them you can go whenever you need to, then they all just want to go over there, and so that's the problem. Like, I would love to do more, like if you're feeling bad or sad or you need to talk to somebody or hug somebody or whatever, go grab a bear or something, but then they're all going to want to do it. And so I don't know how to implement that into my classroom and put limits on it, but still have it open for them.
Mm-hmm.
One day they brought in new desks at the school and they were in big boxes, and I took one and I lit the kids like paint on it, and I cut a hole in it and I let them, it's called the calming corner, and I let them crawl in it, and I put like a blanket and a teddy bear and like the little squishy little ball things and some boo-boo cream, but it's hand sanitizer. And like I just had that there, like anytime like they are extra crying and all of that, I let them crawl in the box, just calm themselves down. And the classroom is already very cluttered, but I have that so that they have a way to take a breather and go in and do like the common activities that we practice every morning. And then when they come out, they're okay. But like you said, Hannah, they do like all have an issue like wanting to go there. Like they'll say, I'm mad, but they were just smiling and happy. I know that's because they want to go in the box. So now I like have it to where like if I actually see that you need to go in there, I tell them to go in there. They can't just go in there. So I kind of like, if they're crying and I actually see that hey, okay, you can take the time and go into the common box, just crawl in there and relax. And then but I think that is very effective. Even like a bean bag in a corner or something. And like maybe put like a little sheet or a canopy over it or something like that. Exclusive. Just some ideas.
Like that. Thank you.
I have a calm down corner in my classroom with like a really nice fuzzy pillow and whatnot. And I just saw also in the article, it says, where is it? Basically, you have to know the kid's trigger and get them there before they are like out of control. However, that's where I'm struggling right now because my kids are so responsive and reactive. And so I can't really, if one kid were to like say something like under its breath and I was all the way across the room, then I can't respond quickly enough to be able to kind of bring them off to the side and have them like breathe and work it out before that even happens or in between because they're so quick to react and to respond about it. And yeah, so I'm all for calm down corners and, you know, processing your feelings and giving yourself time and working through that because those are great coping mechanisms. I'm just stuck in the fact of how do I get my kids to not react so quickly to things.
Yeah, Meg, I think that makes a lot of sense because I think it has to happen before that, like under your breath kind of like whisper happens, because then that's like also like potentially like stirring up others around them too. Even if it's just like one student saying something under their breath and everyone else goes, ooh, you know, like that just causes the reaction that we're trying to avoid, you know? I think part of it is like helping. So, okay, let me go back. I totally agree with not everyone being able to like go at any time, right? And Kenny, I like what you said about, you know, like you deciding or you seeing, and you don't even maybe have to have a conversation, but just saying like, oh, why don't you, you know, take a breather over here or whatever. I think when you consider your like 2, 3, maybe even 4 students that are your like biggest behavior challenge, those are probably the students that you have multiple conversations with on a weekly basis, maybe even daily. And maybe those are the students that you are like, you know, like almost training before you get to this point, like remove yourself from the situation, step out and go over here or whatever. Don't wait for my permission. And at least those couple of students have that like out if they need it, so that they don't get to that point that then you have to like reprimand them for something. The other thing that I would say is, depending on your class, and this is like something I learned, I don't know, halfway through my second year probably, because I had similar behavior challenges my first year and my second year with one student in each class. Depending on your class, sometimes students don't calm down if they know that others can see them, right? So like, even if my back is to everybody else, I'm already like feeling heated or getting like hot about like something that was really starting to make me mad. But if I think that anybody else is watching me, that might not actually solve the problem. Does anybody feel like they have students like that? Okay, so then potentially like we have to get a little more creative. I think Kenya's is great because it's enclosed and it feels like safe and confined. I know that fourth graders might not want to crawl into a box, you know, and like that makes sense. It works for 4-year-olds maybe. But just considering like, is there a way? Is there a space? Is there a way that your door can be partially open and students can just step outside the door so that when you're standing, you can still see them, but the rest of the class maybe can't? Or like when the door is wide open and students like step behind the door still in the classroom. Or like a beanbag or a chair or something that's like maybe blocked by part of a bookshelf or part of your desk, or you know, something like that, so that students feel like I can calm down in this space without worrying about everybody else and without worrying that people are looking at me or that people are meddling me or things like that. Whatever it is, I think it's, you know, like we have been talking about, it has to be a space within our classroom. We know that it's the end of February. Right now, our schools do not have resources. Even if we applied for a grant like this, we don't have resources for this like glorious room that has all these like wonderful things that students can use to calm down and a staff person, right? Like not feasible, but I think a lot of the principles make sense. Students remove themselves when they know that they need to calm down or they need to like step out of a situation. They spend a couple minutes like just doing something that is calming for them. They choose what that is. And then they like go back into the classroom knowing that they're calmed down and that they're ready to participate and engage again. And I think all of those things can be true even without this like, you know, glorious magical room that we read about. So I'm going to skip that one. So let's briefly talk about what are we experiencing. Let's like actually list out some of these things. What are some of students' negative behaviors and experiences? And then let's maybe brainstorm some of the support structures that we can provide for them. So I'd love to see if there are any trends, but let's get like really cool. Let's get really specific so that we can provide some really cool support structure opportunities potentially for people. So let's do this in the chat box just because that might give you some extra time to think as you're typing. What are some of those like specific negative behaviors or experiences that you have noticed? And if you're a second year, it could be things from last year. And then we'll come back to that list and go through some potential supports that we can offer. So we'll take like 3 minutes to do this. Any of your thoughts in the chat box are great.
When we say negative behaviors, are we saying negative like classroom behaviors or like at home experience?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's just talk about classroom behaviors. Let's only list what those negative things are. We'll come to the support structures next. I'll give some examples. In my classroom, like I said, with 2 students, it would have been like loud outbursts. It would have been yelling at somebody else who they think is like looking at them, potentially throwing a chair, getting mad and like pushing their paper and pencil, in front of them, that kind of thing. Okay, so currently it looks like we kind of have 2 buckets of things. So one is how they treat others. So if I missed any, correct me. But how they treat others, so mean to friends, yelling, arguing, hitting one another, things like that. The second bucket is kind of a frustration bucket, it seems. Pushing paper and pencils in frustration, cursing, tipping desks over, breaking or misusing materials. Um, are there things that I'm missing that don't fall into those 2 categories? Okay, so let me type these quick. Okay, so looking at these 2 buckets, what are some potential support structures or things that we could do so that these don't happen? And we probably want to talk about these, like I said, as 2 separate things. These are potentially things you already have going on in your classroom that maybe others can benefit from. So would love to hear some of those ideas. If you just put something in the chat, will you share a little bit more just out loud, just because we have such a small group? Sorry, I didn't ask that before.
Give them more responsibility so that they can like be heard from the teacher more and the student. Like, say for example, like the calendar, like, can you get up and share the month, the day to your friends, like for that portion of the morning, just so that they have more responsibility and that they feel like they're more involved, so they're not doing things in centers to get attention when that's already given to them through their roles.
Yep.
I've been doing daily behavior reports that we go over together during and at the end of the day too, and goals and whatnot. So that when one of my students has a good day, she's like super excited about it. And so that gives her something to look forward to, and then she gets an award as well. And then also giving them responsibility, so a job to do every day. And then for my student that's significantly lower and in exceptional ed, I've been having other students help him. And so we've realized it takes a lot of patience to be able to work with him. But if we're all able to take turns in the responsibility to do that, then we all have a little bit of patience to give him. And that helps him get the support he needs, like just through his education, and to be able to sit down and to help him. And it also keeps him distracted. So then he doesn't want to run his mouth and be threatening others in order to get attention.
Other ideas? These are really good. I'm just not taking notes because I'm a better listener if I can like fully listen and not try and like synthesize your ideas.
Having an agreement sign, like an agreement between the student and maybe the parent and yourself, and then have like positive incentives, like, you know, you do this and you keep that up, then you get that. And I guess like just positive rewards and like an agreement that both can understand so that they hold themselves accountable.
Has anybody, so, okay, you can just like thumbs up or thumbs down. Do you use a clip chart? And Kenya, were you the one that said it doesn't work for you?
No, I don't think it works
Okay.
for everybody.
Right. Has anybody done, so that's helpful. I didn't want to talk about this in case people didn't use this. Has anybody done, okay, so let me backtrack. Anybody have any students that whatever your bottom color is can work their way there in a matter of like maybe 6 minutes some days? Sometimes. Has anybody ever done like an alternate behavior plan outside of the clipstick for those students? I mean like 1 or 2 students potentially. Meg, do you want to share? I saw you nod.
So I have a chart where it's like says morning work, and then an area. So then you put like a smiley face, one of those little like straight faces, or a sad face, and then on another column it says, "Did you complete all your work?" And then I put comments in there. And so it's just looking at each part of the day and what their behavior was for just that individual part. And if that, most of the time, you know, if you have negative behavior, then you're not able to get all your work done. So that could be the reason why your daily grade is a 0 for that day, because you had bad behavior. It wasn't because you didn't understand it, but because you didn't participate. And that works on the days that it's good, that she has a good day. And it's nice to be able to like give her that reminder throughout the day. But then there are just some days where she's in a mood where, like, it doesn't matter. She's already on this roll. She doesn't really care to change her behavior at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think the thing about the alternative behavior plan is that we have to figure out like what can be different that will make it work that the clipstick isn't working for. So for me, like I shared briefly like some of the experiences that I had. And the two students that I described both had the alternate behavior plan each year. And it wasn't always perfect, that's for sure. But it was like, I taught 5 and 6 year olds. So it was like 2 jars. One had a happy face, one had a sad face. And it was literally like marbles in a jar. The thing that's different about that from a clipstick is that it was like much more fruitful. So like every center, there was a marble. Every transition, there was a marble. We moved from the rug to the carpet to do morning work, marble. Sitting on the carpet during our story, marble. Like there much more like short-term, quick impact kind of thing, so that those particular students, like, you know, like if they were getting moved down, they would just hold on to the fact that like I'm on red or I'm on orange, and like, you know, my grandma said that I can't come home on orange and it's not my fault because so-and-so like tripped me and made me fall, you know, like it was just like holding on to like these like such intense emotions that they then couldn't focus on anything else in order to change the behavior. So they had to see the like immediate impact with like much smaller short-term components, which was like every transition, every center, things like that. The other thing, so the alternative behavior plans, I think, are one way to like help empower students and help them see like we have this behavior system set up for a reason. This is like going to help you be successful. This is not just a way to like penalize you or like punish you or, you know, get you into trouble or whatever. The thing about that is I feel like in order to set up something like that, students have to know in advance. And I feel like your principal, parents or grandparents, and the student need to be on board and know like this is happening on Tuesday. This is what it's going to look like. This is what will be sent home. Please check that. And like, you know, share your comments. Like all of that has to be like kind of a big deal. And everybody kind of has to be on the same page there. The other thing that somebody had mentioned, Kenya mentioned giving more responsibility and helping students be leaders so that they like have more pride in their classroom and in their role and in the jobs that they have in you know, that space and whatever. And somebody had said like in centers, so even considering, are there leaders for the day, like a line leader, you know, like I'm trying to remember all of mine. We had a feel good friend. So if somebody was sad, like that person would go and like get a tissue for them and like pat their back and say, it'll be okay, you know, or like whatever. But then is there a way to have every center have like a leader for the day? That way that can rotate. Everybody has a chance to have that job, you know, like once a week basically. But then they have like that ownership over their group and making sure that their group is really on task. I love the idea of like other helpers, especially like classroom tutors and students helping in that regard. Any other ideas that you have for how we can combat some of these like more challenging things to help students not lash out, but also like not do something that they then get into even more trouble doing? Anything else come to mind?
I just wanted to share, like you were saying, the alternate behavior plan. I've now, like, reflecting on it too, the clip chart is much more public. And so when I always thought, so when I was student teaching too, I was like, oh, clip charts, but then the clip charts still didn't do much, you know? But like it makes everything more public. And so students then have their reactions be public. But especially my one student who loves to like yell out and whatnot, when she's on her alternate behavior plan and it's just between her and I, her reactions are just to her and I. And like I shouldn't be on, like, can we please? And then she'll try to like reason with me, you know? But it's much better having a conversation than having her have an outburst and be like, why do I have to move my clip down in front of the whole class? That then gets them distracted. So I like the private versus public thing.
Yeah. Are people's clip charts hanging on a wall, or are they like an actual like yardstick that you move clothespins?
Mine's on a wall and it has clothespins on it.
Okay.
Oh, the bathroom door.
Mine's on a stick.
Okay. So I'm also thinking, my assistant was so good at this, y'all. She was like the kindest, sweetest woman ever, but if she got mad, and she would like, oh my goodness, students would be so upset if they thought she was like upset with them. And she like knew that too, but she would have the clipstick facing her and then be like, and like move somebody down. But then in the same regard, she would be like, and like move like clips up, wouldn't tell anyone. So everyone like felt like, oh, my clip could have gotten moved up, or I know I was not doing what I was supposed to. I guarantee my clip didn't go up, but she's moving clips up, so maybe she'll notice me, so maybe I'll get it together. And like, you know, in a few minutes or after the next thing, like maybe my clip will get moved up. So nobody could get mad that their clip didn't get moved up because they didn't know whose got moved up, but it was like also like a space of like self-reflection kind of, to say like, I know that wasn't me, but there's a chance that it could be me next time. And I'm thinking like, Kenya, you said, you know, yours might be like a little bit separate, or if it's like on the wall, you know, like where not everyone can see it. Even just being like, at the end of this, if you're having like an especially bad center rotation, at the end of this center, I'm moving 3 clips up. And you might have to like really stretch to figure out who those 3 are moving up. But I guarantee you will have like a much better turnaround with kids trying to get moved up, and just like help. And then as soon as that happens, then you can be like, we started that center really rough, but we finished it so good. I'm so proud of you. I know that you can do it. Let's start our next rotation the way that we ended the last one. And we did so great. And you can like, again, be like, I might move more clips up next time, you know, or whatever, but you have to give like some of that like verbal affirmation of like, I know that we didn't start the way that we needed to, but we finished it and I'm proud of you in that way. Okay. There's an article I can share with you. You don't have to read it right now. We were going to look at it, but we're going to be short on time. But it's an example of how they use restorative justice in a high school setting. And it helps, I think even though it's high school, it's actually really good. It helps show how students feel supported and safe, even in like challenging situations. I think that we've talked about a lot of these things in our own classrooms or in like the smaller components of our classroom, whereas like the high school setting is definitely different. We're seeing different experiences through that particular article, but also there's just like a different atmosphere with constant changing of classes and stuff like that. The very last thing that I want to like just connect all of this to, how familiar are you with the school to prison pipeline?
Pretty familiar.
Okay. So all of this connects, not that we're saying like our kids that are, you know, like getting disciplinary actions are like on a path to prison by any means, but to some extent, if we don't figure it out in elementary school, those behaviors are going to be magnified. And it's not even just the behavior, it's the emotion that is behind that behavior, right? The frustration or the confusion or the low self-esteem, the like uncertainty because of like the home or family situation. Maybe you don't like know whose house you're going to, those kinds of things, all of that like then manifests itself in, you know, like the disruption and the behavior challenges and things like that. So making sure that no matter what, we feel comfortable and confident, knowing like the students that have the most difficult time in your classroom, that we are empowering them with whatever means that is appropriate for our grade level. That's all the things that we just talked about. They fit into those two buckets, but there might be outliers. There might be other things that we need to think about or problem solve around. But all of those help students to not have as many like outbursts or challenging situations or feel upset or angry in our classrooms. And so I think the biggest thing to consider is what resources are we empowering them with? What alternatives would we want in place for students? And that's why we just did the brainstorming. So where this fits in, I have kind of just a short brainstorm that I posted here. I connected this to our topic from last time, but go ahead and just read through that. I know that some of these are not directly connected to the specific behaviors that we talked about tonight, but I think they're all connected to discipline and behavior management to some extent. So go ahead and read through those and then we'll chat. So there's a number of different things, different ways that we can give our students that additional boost, both in esteem, go back to this slide, to empower them, also to like have systems set up that support their needs. This is not an exhaustive list by any means. There's so many more things that we can do. The thing that I want us to consider for our assignment for this session is how we connect behavior management potentially, and some of those behaviors that we were just talking about with our content. And I think that's really important. I don't want us to just like plan a conversation, because I think you're all doing that already, having conversation after conversation, helping students like understand their behavior, understand how it impacts you, their peers, themselves, stuff like that. We know that relationship building is the most important thing, especially with our most struggling and most challenging students. So what we're going to do for this assignment is I want you to plan a conversation with your most struggling students, academic and behavior wise. Like they don't have to be your most struggling both in academic or behavior, but I think your biggest behavior challenges sometimes are also struggling in academics, but that might not be the case all the time. So plan a conversation. I want this to be around their progress thus far. And I think the two biggest things to highlight, what are the points to celebrate in their work? And I want us to be really careful with language here. We're not celebrating how smart they are. Like, you're so smart, I know that you can do this. I want us to celebrate their hard work. That way it doesn't feel like it's something ingrained, that anything that they do, if I work hard, I'm going to be celebrated. That way they never think like, I'm not smart, I can't do this. And I also want you to concentrate on their 1 to 2 priority areas. And these priority areas are things that they should be focused on for the next month. So between now and a week or 2 after spring break, basically. So not necessarily like huge priority areas that we want them to really tackle by the end of the year, because that's too far out. It's too far to think about and remember, but just in like the coming weeks. If you want to really think short term, it could be for your 9 weeks test too. So, but it's up to you. So I want you to either, again, like always, a video or your plan for this. It can be like lesson plan format. It can also just be however you want to type it out. I don't care. Anything works with that. But I think the biggest thing is for this data conversation to be rooted in their progress, so that they know like how far they've come and where they still need to go, and that they have like 1 to 2 things to really prioritize and really focus on, and they're really crystal clear on what they can do for that. and this is about building relationships, and it's about building trust between the two of you so that you're then able to do those things that we brainstormed on that slide with the 2 boxes for those solutions, if that makes sense. Are there questions about this? Oh, good. Thanks, Meg. I'm glad. I'm deviating a little bit from the expectation because this isn't necessarily, oops, why am I on the side? That isn't necessarily a lesson plan. But I think that I know that, building relationships and connecting with our most difficult students takes a lot of extra effort. So I'm trying to help you do both of those things. I have a few more resources. I can put these in the chat box if you want them. They're going to be long links, but a couple of things for you to snag or favorite or whatever if that's something that interests you. But that is your assignment. If you don't have questions, I feel good about us closing out here. Thank you so much once again for your participation, especially with a small group. It'd be awkward if we only converse through the chat box, so I appreciate you talking. I'm excited to see videos or look at your lesson plans in the next coming week, I guess. And just a quick reminder, if you haven't thought about this in a while, I just want everyone to feel really clear around how we're wrapping up the year, because we're about to kick off Q4, which is so crazy, but it's right around the corner. So really making sure that you come into Q4 feeling really good and really clear about like data expectations for you, for your students. If you teach lower elementary, we have a math summative that everybody gives depending on their grade level. We have the STAR data that we look at, and then also using our writing rubric and grading writing samples. And if you haven't done a writing sample this semester, please, please, please do one before you go to spring break. That way you come back in Q4 and feel so good about knowing the priority areas for writing to kick off Q4. If you don't do it until after spring break, honestly, it just wastes a week or two of time that we don't have time to waste, because Q4 already feels like so short with all the things that get thrown into it. So if you have questions about that, let me know. Otherwise, thank you. It's been lovely. I hope that you have a great rest of your evening, and I will see everybody at the summit in just over a week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.